I didn't really expect to be making a video on this, but I figured maybe I'll make like a more proper edited video on the topic. I don't really know. This is the Talbert files, which is this sort of unfinished, more lore-heavy draft, supposedly, of the Freddy files. Almost all of this is completely unused. From what we understand, the general take is almost all of this was scrapped or replaced, or at least we don't know what was scrapped or replaced, which makes the book entirely unreliable. It was found by Tom. A lot of the information is compiled by Penrose, and Smear, as stated here. Organized by Faye. Or FAE, I don't. There's an introduction here that explains this. This Freddy Files came out in 2017. It was sort of released between, as stated here, FNAF 1, 2, 3. It was before 6. Point is, it's between the draft. We've had official statements from Scott, as they've stated here, that stated that it went through a few drafts of like how it was presented, what the concept of the book was going to be. And one particular version, which is the document I have here, is supposedly one of those earlier draft versions, nicknamed the Talbert files. There's this whole thing from Scott. I would recommend just reading this on your own time. It's a lot of stuff, and I don't want this video to be that long, but every time I say that, it ends up being an hour long, so this video will go on forever if I read all of this. But it's sort of one of those things where it seems like it's not really canon as much as, like, here's the main point. What we got, what the actual games that were released, what the actual Freddy Files released, are what's canon, quote unquote. I mean, the Freddy Files have a lot of weird misinformation, but whatever. Point is, what came out is what came out. This information that's in here is subject to being overwritten or outdated. In fact, based on the description earlier of what the 3 versions we went through for the Freddy Files, I have a feeling that there's just too much unreliability and instability in this information to treat it as the original intended canon or anything like that. Because that's what some people are trying to argue this as, is that this was the original plan for the canon. I don't think so. I wouldn't use... There's only one thing of this game, this entire thing I would use. And it's not even a book. It's like a half-described PDF of the book that we don't even get to see much of other than this. So, for the first layer of oddity is obviously the fact that this never came out. This is an unfinished version of it. The second layer of oddity to this is that the Freddy Files weren't that solid on explaining lore firsthand as like a canon breakdown or lore dump. Or at least the Freddy Files we got. This is a lot more like the survival logbook, how it handled lore. It feels like a lot more like an in-universe compilation of concepts and ideas. And we also know that there went through 3 perspectives even within that concept of maybe being a lore dump, there was a version that was a lot more of an in-universe investigator, which is what this book seems to be. It seems to be from draft 1 or around that time. Then there was a version that was going to be an out-of-universe, like, FNAF fan kind of take on it, and then there was going to be, like, an in-universe online blogger tampering with things, which also seems to be part of this to some extent. And all 3 of these are scrapped, so there's, like, 3 drafts we've seen of this book, or we haven't seen of this book, that are weirdly muddled into this and all that. And then we have the word from Scott Cawthon, supposedly. We're still waiting for a confirmation on that, if that's anything. So, one of the interesting things of this particular version, let me explain how this document works a little bit quickly as we go through. Blue should consistently be from the actual supposed book. Remember, these are not screenshots from the book. This is a description of what the book is like, which is a little concerning format-wise, because that's, I would say, layer 4 of bullshit of all of this. I mean, not bullshit. How do I explain this? Layer 4 of crap we have to dig through to figure out what's in, you know? When I say bullshit, I don't mean the book is bullshit. I mean there's just a lot of crap we have to wade through to figure out what's really being said here. It's because, you know, it's always filtered through whoever's perspective is making it. For the sake of this, let's assume this is a very authentic description of what's being said, because we don't really have reason to doubt what's being said. That said, the red text and orange text will be something from the people who uncovered this book, being Tom, Penrose, Smear, Faye, and all that. Though the red text and orange text are going to be kind of notes from them. The red text typically is going to be more like a descriptor of something that's not written in the book. The blue is mostly like, this is what is written in the book transcribed from where. So like, for example, this is Cassidy Tucker, who we'll get to in a bit. Daddy took me to work today. He showed me so many things. He made so many colorful characters, so many great friends. My favorite color is green. He made one just for me. Her name is Happy. So this is the first kind of weird oddity of this unused version of the script, or not script, the unused version of the book, or in quotes. Cassidy is basically Charlie. So Daddy, we'll later learn, is Emmett Tucker, who is, for all intents and purposes, a prototype Henry in this. We even have, like, my favorite color is green, which will become a thing with Charlie later. This also has, yeah, this is being explained here. Like I said, it seems like this unfinished version of, like, the Charlie storyline, but with the name Cassidy thrown around. It's also interesting that it's Cassidy Tucker instead of Henry Emily and Charlie Emily, which makes this another kind of like oddity of like, do we consider this Cassidy or not, is one question. Or do we just treat this as a Charlie with a different name? In fact, something going back to like the earlier message from Scott, there was like a lot of, yeah, I didn't, there was many times over the years where I plan to say, you're seeing less of a story, but more so ideas I had. Making another game clear for those sense was my priority at that point. I explored many scopes during the time period, ultimately leading to most of them being scrapped. However, that's a sacrifice. I can't tell exactly what changed. This book, a lot of this book was jotting down ideas I had to expand the story. This is like this unfinished, weird-ass draft of the storyline. Another character that's established here is Steve. Steve, I think they say his last name later. There's a lot of last names. Steve is phone guy. It's just like stated elsewhere in the book. And then we have more information from Cassidy Tucker. And then we have Emmett Tucker talking to William. Dear Will, please just give me a chance. I know this project isn't as high-tech as you dream. You're sick in the head, and I'm tired of you bossing me around. Just pay me, and I'll take my money and go far away from this place, never to be seen again. My family is already in a low-income state, and I've taken enough funds out of my savings to dedicate my life to this project just to satisfy you. So I quit. Take what else you want. Take what else you want from me left. This Henry's a little different. Emmett's a little different from Henry in some spots character-wise. I mean, maybe there's overlap we didn't really see, but there's some kind of odd points that don't even line up with novel Henry exactly. Maybe, I don't know. I think there's going to be some level of subjectivity to this. Then we have, this is the first bombshell that's like weird in this, and we're going to get to Cassidy more later, because this Cassidy is so fucking weird. My happiest day, with a bunch of scattered children's drawings behind it. Letter CVA. Freddie and Bonnie are drawn in pitch black, with a little girl holding their hands in the middle, writing above, you are not one of them. There's a lot weird here. So you are not one of them was later used in Ultimate Custom Night. We know who our friends are, you are not one of them. Which makes this question of, like, presumably this is to William? And also, remember, Cassidy Tucker is Charlie as far as we know. Which is extra bizarre here. If this book is real, which is the other thing, there still is wiggle room that this is not a real book. That this is some sort of hoax. I personally am leaning towards it not being right now, but it's all up until Scott's like word on the matter. Actually, while I'm working on this, I'm assume Scott's been emailed, but I want to make sure he didn't. Yeah, as of writing this, there's no statement from Scott currently, so I think we're good on that farm for now. There's no description of the little girl in this thing, which is weird. I do wonder if a lot of these ideas were used for the logbook. There's a letter writing on a happy state, because it was weird. Because like a lot of people were like, I already got a comment on my Cassidy video, saying like, oh, this post aged well with the Talbert files, or like didn't age well with the Talbert files, but this really didn't change that video much, because we still don't have, because there's two Cassidys in this book, which is frustrating. With a question mark, two Cassidys. This one is going to become Charlie if this is a real book and this was really part of the planned narrative. Because this is the daughter of Emmett, who seems to be the creator of the mediocre melodies, has a green robot made just for her. This is just a description of like places William owns. This is a weird point. One of these just sounds like, oh yeah, that's the FNAF 4 house. 1 story, 2 bathrooms. We don't see the bathrooms, but it's a weird art style. 3 bedrooms adds up. We The bedroom, three bedrooms is actually kind of weird, because now I'm wondering, these are placeholders, never mind, we probably shouldn't think about those. There's a constant point that does confirm that the bite victim is William's second son, though Talbert's trying to deny it. He's saying, like, I do not discuss things before 1983. It confirms there was a divorce in the Afton family household with a redacted family member. And then we have Marianne, presumably Emmett Tucker's wife. And it would confirm the Afton family was divorced in 1983, stated here. This is one thing I'm talking about, how weird this book is. Like, what are these notes? So is Freddy's a cover-up for dying at Fredbear's? Is Fredbear's where Cassidy, in quotes, really died? This is so fucking confusing. And this is where the side notes kind of confusing and weird. It's a lot of what's the word? Why am I blanking on it? It's a lot of conjuncture. Or conjecture, not conjecture. I don't even know if conjecture's a word. It's a lot of conjecture. It's a lot of like, oh, Talbert's deliberately trying to erase things. Is that what the book said? Or are they just assuming based on this description here? This is one of those, we don't have the real book, which is frustrating. This is one of the bigger parts. For all my mortal life, I have not been able to fully grasp why I do not feel the things that are deemed normal. In fact, all I feel is rage towards others who do not deserve the life they've been given, not taking advantage of what lies beyond tangibility. Despite the death of my very own son, I feel no sorrow, no regret, no pain. I feel ridicule, and the burning fury within me continues like rolling thunder. But rage will not get me anywhere, not unless I mend it into something else. If there is meaning to life, if there is purpose beyond hardships, if there is a purpose to all the hardships and sorrow, it will remain elusive. It will remain an elusive dream. For some, the mystery of death and the afterlife is frightening and overwhelming. But I have learned to embrace those unknowns. If anything deserves the name God, it is the very laws of nature themselves, the only universal truth, the only higher powers we must all bow down to, before our time runs out. Every place he walked and every tear he shed has left its effect in reality. Truly, one cannot die. Truly, one cannot die if they remain at peace. If there remain at peace. Truly, one cannot die if there remains at peace. It is only a part of them that dies. I will replicate this, and I will create something and I will create something with the power to give life. And I will create something with the power to give gifts. And I will create something with the power to give the gift of life. I simply need a volunteer. Perhaps that Tucker girl. She shines too much of a bright smile. She's a container for love that will burst. I will repurpose her. So this is a really interesting final quote, as it implies bite victim first and foremost, but it also implies that William didn't give a shit about the bite victim dying. And also it kind of half confirms Charlie gave gifts, but also like made it darker and weird. I'm very confused by this, because she says, I will create something with the power to give the gift of life. I simply need a volunteer. Perhaps that Tucker girl, which is implying that William killed Charlie, planning her to have the power to give the gift of life. Like, that's an interesting lore drop if that's the case, because that would confirm pup stuff, but also add like this weird twist to it. Also, since he is not yet killed Charlie or / Cassidy, that implies the bite victim has already died. Because it says, from the death of my very own son, I feel no sorrow, no regret, no pain. Though it does show he feels ridicule, which is interesting. The side note's a little weird because I don't like the phrasing, this is William giving proper characterization. This is what I'm saying, where there's some conjecture thrown in here that I'm not the biggest fan of. This is true that it's closer to the novel characterization, but also there's some ideas of Dr. Phineas from Frights that are kind of in here. The idea of not being able to feel love and compassion as it would be normal. There's also, I can see the comparison. I just feel like saying it's the proper characterization is like, I think there's, excerpt from, this is annoying. They say it's an excerpt from Autobiography of Yogi with the text, give gifts, give life, but we don't know which we don't know which excerpt. I'm assuming it's the one from FNAF 1. The puppet is written with a bubble with me, Brimley. And Tom says that's the thing that changed from the final lore. I don't know where Tom is citing that the Afton created the puppet. That's what I'm saying. Like, these side notes are kind of odd. I will create something with a power. I just need a volunteer. I could easily see this as William just planning to get something to possess Charlie. It's also clearly not as intentional in the game line, in the actual canon games, because the puppet just kind of crawls over to Charlie. There's no, like, leaning it up against her or vice versa. There's no plan like what's implied here. Which could also imply that this concept changed. This is just a statement that a child drew. The puppet is me beneath, and given the pacing and what we know about this Cassidy scene. Steve Callahan, that's our phone guy name. See, this is William, presumably after Elizabeth's death, saying, like, oh, I know what it's like to feel, because this is from William Afton 2. I know how it feels to lose someone. I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter. I know I can't replace her, but I can show you something that'll be a gift. Do you remember that Tucker boy? This is a weird side note, because once again, where the hell is this implication coming from? Because it doesn't match what we're being shown here exactly. This is the only mention of Callahan's daughter within the book. Seemingly, her presence is only to motivate Afton to experiment with Cassidy's soul, resulting in the creation of Golden Freddy. Where is that coming from? Because as far as we know, Cassidy is the puppet according to the rest of this. This is what's so frustrating about not having the original book, is there's these weird side notes and implications, but I'm not sure what exactly they're citing here. On one hand, I should trust these people because they're the ones who supposedly have the actual original book. But at the same time, there's stuff like Drowning where information isn't always presented in the most rational, like, logical way. With Drowning, it was presented as, hey, this is our takeaways from this. We think this is about the Cassidy being the princess. And then when people actually got their hands on the book, the idea died out a lot because it was presented as, like, the first draft of an idea before we really, as a community, got to look at it. This part's weird to me, but this is just another part of Talbert denying that there's anything before 1985, pretty much. I do find the quote weird that I have no interest in researching ghosts being in the building before June 26, 1985. The building being singular, but the bite victim, the second son who would have died in Fredbear's, not Freddy's. It's so weird. Circus Baby Pizza World. It's one interesting thing is was born featuring there's only 3 state-of-the-art robotic entertainers. No Freddy, weirdly enough. Circus Baby is said to be open a year before facing difficulties. That's interesting. We didn't know, as far as we knew in the actual game line, and this was already stated in the game continuity already at this point, which is what's weird. Which is why they propose this was like Ghost Riders, which is just another that's Layer 5, by the way. This might not have been written by Scott firsthand. This might have been written by Ghost Riders adapting Scott's notes, which is even more confusing. So, there's some contradictions with a game that was already out when this book was being written, supposedly. And also, Ballora's name is wrong, and there's no Funtime Freddy. It's Ballorina instead of Ballerina, or instead of Ballora. This is just a reference of the ghost of the kid seeing run around in 1985. This is the only part I would use of any of this with an asterisk. I think these 4 being the names of the kids is fair game for fan theories and names. Not for canon theories, as in like, oh, this is what the lore is supposed to be. I think if you're going to make a timeline or something like that, these could be names you could be used. It would be Susie Emma Steller, Gabriel Gardner, Fritz Smith Jr., Jeremy Fitzgerald Jr. This is the weird part. Cassidy Talbert. Cassidy Talbert. We've been talking about Cassidy Tucker this entire point. Who the hell is Cassidy Talbert? Talbert's the name of the researcher of all of this. And when someone asks a question of what the hell you're doing, it says, like, you don't have a daughter or any adoption or ancestry or anything like that. So Talbert's now claiming one of the kids is his daughter for some fucking reason. This is also just further establishing this is a different Talbert from the one we knew in Frights, almost completely. Like, these two are just different characters. profile of the MCI suspects. So these are the people that were suspected for the killing or could have done it. This is a weird one. Mike is just straight up called Mike Schmidt is innocent, but it's Michael Afton. Also confirms he accidentally killed his brother. He's 17 at the point in 1985, which is interesting to drop. Or at least at the time. No, this is around FNAF 1, because Phone Guy stated as being deceased. God, that's an extra layer of weird. This entire thing is so bizarre. Also, Elizabeth is called Abigail. Once again, doesn't even... Actually, her name wasn't dropped at this point, so that could have been genuinely just like a weird thrown around idea. Weirdly connects to Abby in the movie, but that might just be a coincidence. Reportedly is diagnosed as a schizophrenic because he has seen the shadow animatronics. Probably a misdiagnosis. Once again, is this what is actually written in the book or not? Because this one is weird, and this one is weird. Because we just can't check this. Also, Phone Guy has a gambling addiction. Don't know what relevance that is. This one might be interesting to see with time, depending on how the week before plays out, that book. Once again, more miscellaneous notes. I don't know where this is being confirmed or not. Whatever. William's attorney mentioned he was involved in funding several resources alongside Father Entertainment programs. He said he was not present during the pizzeria during the murders. Phone Guy was. What are these things? Leaked court documents. Where are these in the book? It's so weird. It's so hard to work with when we don't know what's being are these accurate descriptions or are these edited descriptions? Like, is this the text copy and pasted basically? Professor routine and receives financial aid. Why are they keeping the spare robots in the back room? Is that implying William is funding the new Phasma Entertainment? Is that a plot line that's been in play? Then there's the DCI is referenced here. 5 teens in St. George, Utah have gone missing. Interesting that it's not in Hurricane. But the bodies just vanish. So that's the thing. In and out, just like the original games played it out. Emmett Tucker is in the Toy Animatronics criminal database under house arrest for trying to kidnap his daughter, who did not have custody over during divorce. What the fuck kind of Petscop plotline is this? Also, where is this being lore dropped? Remember, this is supposed to be an early draft of the Freddy Files. Because remember, the Freddy Files is a strategy guide, not just a random lore dump. So it's like, where... Was this just a Fazbear? Like, was this just the logbook, basically, a prototype for that? Like, was this a much more lore-oriented thing? It's just so different from how every other FNAF lore thing has been dropped, which is what's so weird about this. Steven has fascination with life beyond death. On the sixth phone call on the night of the night guard shift, it's mentioned that Steve would have taken the job afterwards. Little blurb of red text. How would Steve have known about the usage of the gold? Which, once again, is like... Talbert is such a weird character because it feels like he's just lying in some spots. Like, what does he get out of framing Phone Guy, though, if that's the point? Because it stated Phone Guy was convicted later. Unless this is not Talbert, but then it's like, did he sign it? Once again, we don't have the original book. Why is Talbert on the side of William? What the hell's with that plot point? Talbert just passively says Foxy, presumably Mangle, because Mangle's also a Foxy. Committed the bite of 87. That's a weird plot point to drop. Mike Schmidt is having the FNAF 2 dreams. That's randomly dropped. No clue what context that came from. Newspaper clippings. This is one of our only shots of the actual book, which is like using the Freddy Scoop logo that was in Freddy Files. It's, once again, what the hell was this book? I'm having a really hard time picturing this entire collective piece. You know, this is not my first time reading this, but I'm going through it again for this video. And what is the latest string of disappearances at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza? Another guard has vanished during his final shift. The guard, identified as Steve Callahan, was last seen leaving the establishment around 10 p.m. Saturday. The establishment reportedly closed the time for Callahan to suspended, making it the second guard to disappear through the hurricane. Also, someone else disappeared. Why? Where did that plotline go? Police are searching for information out of town. Empty-handed. Once again, there's these weird like lines and remarks here that it's like, what was this stated in? The Golden Freddy effect. The poster's an actual real thing. Talbert is being paid by Fazbear Entertainment. He's paying $100,000, a lot actually, like regardless of the time period. Directly quotes, putting pieces back together as for what's happened at Freddy's. I would say the pieces are in place for him with no context or reason. That's weird. Talbert apparently found Springtrap, or was part of the team that found Springtrap. This is just straight up Fright's fiction here, right here. Like, the idea that Fazbear Entertainment made Fright's Fazbear Horror House to capitalize. I mean, more or less. It's a little different, but the idea is more or less there. That it's just made to capitalize on the rumor and horrors, and will become, or is, Fazbear Entertainment. Hasbro, this is weird. Happiest Day is actual arcade machines. A motion residue, what the hell that is. Sure, Proto-Remnant, why not? Can't play with the arcade machines. Some auction stuff, that was a reference in FNAF 3. There's a phone number here, but it's a fake phone number, you can't really use it, but that's weird. Once again, reporting that Talbert is being paid off. Also, this is the code on... So this is Henry talking to Talbert, because it's his phone number, kinda weird. This is the wildest one. I actually made, mostly as, just because we were talking about this in my Discord. I'll show this. This is talking about Mike being, the Stitchwraith. This is a weird one. This is art I made for that concept. It's alright. I made it very quickly, so it's eh. But it was just giving him the Stitchwraith hoodie. I'll get to this in a bit, because that's straight out of this book, supposedly. So, local residents have named it the Stitchwraith, as it has been seen mending multiple toys to a collection of items, while also carrying around what appears to be a Stitch plushie in its right hand. People describe it as a ghastly figure. People describe the ghastly figure as a dead man walking. St. George, once again, we're St. George now, deal with it, not Hurricane. I don't know if Hurricane's like in St. George, but whatever. Stitchwraith received its name from the rumors that the ghastly figure was stitching bodies together and putting them inside trash bags overnight. There was also rumors that was stitching human remains into multiple Stitch plushies. That's weird. Don't know where that plot line was going to go. Don't know why Mike would be doing that, because, yeah, the man walking around is in a big black cloak. His face is always discolored in purple. His eyes are missing with white pinprick white dots, which is just a description of what Mike looks like. What the hell? It seems like if this was really the plan for 6, and we'll see this a little bit later here, that there is going to be like this cryptid plot line. That like, oh, the voices from the sewer drain, which would be Ennard running around in that. There's also been tons of references to like children being run around and seemingly vanishing into thin air. It's all that. And then there's the description of Scrap Baby right here, the clown scrapyard cryptid, the bear in the attic, which is like this vague bear shape thing, who killed a rabbit, a boy's pet rabbit, randomly. And then there's no real references to Springtrap. There's a reference here that Emmett Tucker, once again confirming the Henry connection. How to light lighter fluid efficiently. Missing children report from 1980 to 1999. Washington County, Utah. Where is Fredbear's Family Diner? New Harmony, Utah. I just didn't know that, which is fucking weird. Did you ever find Talbert was the original percent? This is another one of the weird out-of-pocket comments here that I don't quite get. Did you guys figure out that Talbert was the original protagonist of FNAF 6, and that he was the person the job listing was intended for him? I don't get what is informing these lines sometimes. I've said that before where I'm confused. Really? That... maybe? Also, this is supposedly a peek at what Dark Horse's... if Dark Horse Comics did the Silverized books, this is what they would have looked like, which just looks sick as hell. This is the opening sequence of Silver Eyes. Who knows? There's some other concepts here that's being tossed around, but that's like the core book, and it's such a weird mess of information. We have seemingly 2 separate Cassidys, and this kind of dropped halfway through the book, like concept-wise. I have no clue how this information was going to be presented in the original book, if this was spaced between normal FNAF, like, gameplay advice, or if this would have been something completely unique and distinct from everything we understood as FNAF prior. So, to kind of reflect on this book overall, it's such a strange overall collection of information. I think, honestly, it's best to take this book at what Scott's fake quote kind of said is, like, what released his canon. Because you can see, because when you remember this is before FNAF 6 came out, you can see all of the parts of it that would actually be used. Pretty much everything about the pretty much all of the scrapyard concepts, like all of the cryptid plot line is there. It's pretty unambiguous that it's what this would become later. There's some, like, drop details of that, like the ghost children sighting. And we can also see, like, the prototype of a character called the Stitchwraith who goes from place to place collecting garbage and trash that has, like, value to it in some way. That's like, oh, possessed parts or whatever. The prototypes of Fazbear Entertainment covering up things that will be in Help Wanted. You can, like, there's a lot of little parts that we can see that will be implemented. I think pretty much all of this extremely detailed narrative stuff, though, that's like, William Afton, presumed schizophrenic because he may have seen the shadow animatronics, and also, like, this whole, like, conspiracy where he's fucking with, like, 3 different families at the same time, including his own, is, like, really weird and confusing, and also, I can't figure out what Cassidy was supposed to be at this point. It really feels like Scott had the name Cassidy before anything else with the character. Like, there's this weird pseudo-implication with Golden Freddy, but also a lot more implications with the puppet. And then we have, like, there's so many confirmations that would be so easy and so clean to take, you know? Like, it's so tempting to be like, oh, I could use William's big ramble for puppet stuff proof, or bite victim first proof, or really any theory I would want to prove, but, like, I think we should only take what we know for a fact is true from this book, if that makes any sense. And even then, only as, like, this is the pitch for it, you know? We know for a fact that there is a kid named Cassidy. We know for a fact that there is the scrap animatronics would end up being a plot line. We know that William wandering around as a corpse man is the plot line that we establish here. There's no real secrets to that, you know? However, saying, like, Cassidy, like, assuming Cassidy would still be this character, Cassidy Tucker / Talbert / Clemens? Because that was brought up once, that Steve Clemens had a daughter. It's kind of unclear where that plotline was going to go, or, like, what the implication was there. Is that Golden Freddy's kid, and it just was, like, underexplained, and that was going to be explained in the first idea of the logbook, maybe? Did this book become the logbook? Because, as I mentioned before, it's way more lore-oriented than the actual Freddy Files was. The Freddy Files had, like, lore and stuff in it, but it was like this silly little speculative stuff. It was very safe compared to this. Much more of an interactive lore book. And that's assuming this is all correct. Because, or was even meant to be correct at the time. Because, you know, it's an unfinished prototype book, and they're going to be subject to errors, but, like, we have the Ultimate Guide. It says wrong shit all the time. And that actually released. That came out. I also said before that there's, like, the several layers of obscurity and weirdness going on here. We have the initial problem that this is all secondhand from a group of other people talking about a book that we don't have, which is problem 2. That it's, not only is this described by other people, that but we can't fact check the fact that they're described. We don't have this original book for a fact, and then we also have to just assume they're right about this book existing in the first place, which I feel like the screenshots do lend some credibility to. I would not be surprised if this was real, but that's another thing, is like, we have to assume this all was real. And then there's the fact that this is unused, unfinished, and unreleased, and that we weren't ever supposed to see this. And the book is effectively non-canon, because what was released was canon. Then there's the fact that there's ghostwriters apparently involved in this, that there's people writing off of Scott's old sister location notes, which we just have to assume, because that's just like that none of this else was just ghostwriting that got really weird. It's just, there's so many weird spots and implications that we just have to run with. And then you have the fact that one of the characters just lies sometimes. for no real clear reason, because William should be dead at the time of this book existing, because it's clearly set before FNAF 6 and clearly after. It's clearly after or around the time of FNAF 3, which reinforces that I think a lot of this was going to be in the logbook later. Because I can't get that concept out of my head. Because these are set at around the same time. They cover a lot of the same plot beat, just in a very, or I mean, if it wasn't a FNAF 6 plot beat, it feels like this book, the logbook would cover it. The logbook covers Cassidy, it covers Mike running around interacting with stuff that he finds, in this case, for example, like maybe the Bite Victim plush, because I mentioned that. If we go back down to Michael's section, it references that he has a plush in his right hand, which I showed off in the art I did with him. I gave him the plush because it's like, what other plush would it be? What plush would he care about? So like I said, that's kind of covered by, that would be like, I guess the first draft of why the Bite Victim would be, and what would be the logbook. Like I said, there's a lot of plot points that clearly did get used from this. You can see how it would come to like what it would be. However, once again, that's assuming this is all real, and also there's so many things that just clearly did not come to fruition. And Scott said, like, a lot of it was scrapped. A lot of it didn't make it in, according to his statement here, like, or up at the top. Wait, hold on. I want to read. I had two options to make writing that book: cancel a game I didn't want to make, or release one with an unsatisfactory story. I decided on the former. Oh, okay, never mind. I read that line a few weird ways, but what he's saying is, the story here is not the story he wanted to make. And the game that would come with it was the game he didn't want to. And I think that makes sense. This is so much narrative that I think, as much as people complain that it's that the actual FNAF story is so Afton and Emily oriented, and it's so narrow focused on those two, it's much easier to follow than this one. Scott with a question mark is right in this moment that if this was the story that we went with, it would have just been so messy. It would have had four different families, all with different changing in roles, two different Cassidys seemingly, or maybe one Cassidy whose name changes and is sometimes part of a family and sometimes isn't. I can see why this wasn't the story we got. I think the best way to use this document is just to not. The only way to win is not to play. Because as many of the, firstly, the William Afton monologue rules. This part's totally great and all, but I don't think this is worth taking other information away. Other than the fact that this version of William was a complete psychopath, but still had, I've talked about before that I wonder if there was, even if he didn't care for the Bite Victim, there was still an effect on him after that. He doesn't, like how he doesn't feel sorrow or regret for his child dying, he just feels ridicule. And he still feels anger, it's just not the same. It's not the same as a normal family or whatever. It's so tempting to use this book for something that I don't think it should be used for. I think making this the basis of how you interpret the series would be very misguided. I wouldn't blame anyone for doing that. However, I think, what's with the artifacting? Is this a screenshot of a screenshot or something? What is with the text here? Because did it just export weird? I'm fascinated by how this book. I'm more than this book itself almost. I'm curious how this document came to. Achievement unlocked, Minecraft. How did we get here? So you have like early unfinished information that was already outdated when this book would have been made. I've mentioned before, this is so much more lore-oriented than Freddy Files really was. Which is such a weird concept, because it implies something very different in how Freddy Files has been, how we've understood Freddy Files. I don't think it's any secret that a lot of fans have just assumed they were weird ghost-written books And I've always kind of taken that stance on it, that it was like, that Scott might have had some involvement, he might have quickly read through the book and fixed any errors he spotted. But, like, Dawko read through the character encyclopedia, and there's still some weird statements, and typos, and, like, other bizarre concepts in there that just do not reflect what the games have stated or given us. So, like, the idea that Scott himself might have just missed details in a book that someone else mostly wrote would not shock me at all. Though the Scott that's implied to have worked on this is very different from the one who would actually make the Freddy files in some spots. In fact, I wonder if this was real, if this is all real, if this experience is why the Ultimate Guide turned out the way it did, why the Freddy files, like that trilogy, all turned out the way it was, is if his opening statement's correct, if this is a real statement from Scott that he didn't want to be stuck writing, making a story for a game that he didn't really want to make, which would be tied to this, that would make sense that he wouldn't want to be trapped again. Because, I mean, think about it. If you write a story for a book like this that's super detailed and intricate and has tons of different narrators and voices, and you end up not liking it, you only have two choices. Don't do the book, or don't do the game. And the game, obviously, is his priority. Scott likes making games. He likes the FNAF community, and the games are what we all play and what we all enjoy and look forward to. And I have a feeling that the reason we only get these weird snippets of his involvement, even prior to his retirement, like with how like the Ultimate Guide turned out, what might have been because of this. That might be the more interesting thing to consider with this, because you always have to remember that these books, these things, these games don't appear out of thin air. I mentioned this in my video about Cassidy receiving Happiest Day, that these stories aren't just materialized, that they are a real thing that Scott wrote and sat down and made program models for and everything, and had to think of how the story would interlock. And sometimes when we think about what Scott has said and how he's handled certain things and certain like statements from him, that it can really color our opinion of how these creations are presented and how we're given all of this information. I think Cassidy is the weirdest concept in all this, because it's three different families. It seems to be kind of, or two and a half, because it's Cassidy Tucker, then Cassidy Talbert, and then there's Steve Clemens' daughter is mentioned with association with Golden Freddy, and then Cassidy Tucker has association with the Golden Freddy, kinda, sort of, not really. And there's the fact that, like, this Cassidy clearly had a deep-rooted tie to Happiest Day. Happiest Day's brought up a few times throughout all this. But then you have the fact that if Happiest Day is an actual set of arcade machines in FNAF 3, you would think that would mean the Happiest Day occurred during FNAF 3 with those arcade machines, which then raises the question of, like, what the fuck was going on there? Then why are they still haunted in the events of FNAF 6 and all of that? Because you think their resolution would be their resolution, and if this is not the same Charlie, why are there multiple Cassidys in this context? Because there's a Cassidy that's in Lefty. Lefty isn't in this book, I just realized. Holy fuck. Hold on. Cassidy's not in this. Or the puppet's not in this. There's the reference to what will become a code on Lefty in the phone number. That just clicked. There's the Baron in the attic, but that's Molten Freddy, seemingly. I mean, it could be Lefty, but I think it makes more sense to be Molten Freddy, because Molten Freddy was a concept on the table at the time, because we had the conversation between Baby and Molten Freddy in the source code around the time this would have been written. So we know Molten Freddy was definitely on the table in the story at this point. However, Lefty kind of came out of nowhere in FNAF 6 prior, to the puppet drop. So if Happiest Day was a real set of arcade machines that had actual soul-based influence that happened during the events of FNAF 3 after Mike was done with his shift, or Emmett was done with his shift, or Henry, or whoever the fuck was the protagonist at this version of time, then that would make the puppet off the table. Interestingly. I wonder if the original fourth antagonist of FNAF 6 was going to be Mike. Because they've set him up to be that. They've set up the cryptid around the local cryptid dead man, the Stitchwraith, to be in the storyline. So we have 4 threats here. And for whatever reason, and I'm still not exactly clear what the group that made this was really talking about. Because they said it at one point that Talbert is supposed to be the FNAF 6 player, which I don't really get what, because they don't reference what implies that, really, because I didn't get that from the information they've given. I'm trying to picture this version of FNAF 6 and its storyline, because the community's kind of speculated like on and off that there might have been some development changes throughout FNAF 6's time. And I do wonder about that. Maybe. It's also worth noting that Fazbear Entertainment made Fazbear's Frights in this. I've talked about before that it kind of implies Frights fiction. But also, it's... let me find it. Where is the discussion of Fazbear's Fright? Because it's not correct here. Fazbear Fright's Horror House, created by Fazbear Entertainment to capitalize on the rumors. I don't know if Smear typoed here, but it's not Fazbear Fright's Horror House, it's Fazbear's Fright. In fact, if this is a direct quote, then Fazbear Fright's Horror House Management. So the book's just wrong there, I guess. And there's like this whole plush thing down here with a marionette mask. I guess those are all from 3. I know that's what they're going to imply down here. But yeah, you can even see in this image that it's Fazbear's Fright, not Fazbear Frights. Fazbear Frights is the book series. Makes me so curious. It's for so many things. There's such this feeling of like, what is this really, you know? I really hope we don't get a Scott statement like by the time, like immediately when I make this, that it just clarifies everything. I think personally the best option for everyone involved with this is that this is not real. Because as fun as it would be, yeah, no, it wouldn't be fun. Shut up, me. It wouldn't be fun. It would be horrible. I was going to say, like, as fun as it would be to, like, well, it was in the Talbert file, so this was clearly an idea on the table. I think it's just best to say, fuck it, don't use this. Just run with the fact that, like, hey, we have some names to work with. Cassidy Tucker is ever confirmed to be a last name, cool. If we don't have any other names, we'll use it. It's an interesting thing that, this is a theory. I've never been confident enough in it to make it a video. But it's weird that this plays into it a lot. Is that the Stitchwraith Stinger plotline, that universe, is made from a scrapped version of the storyline, potentially the movie timeline. Because there's the Cassidy screenplay, right? And this has Cassidy all over it. And that's so weird to me. And then you have a Stitchwraith in this. Like way before we have the Stingers at all. Like, this would imply that name and that initial premise, the idea of a man going around collecting things to assemble the kids and all that. It's there. The inkling of it is there. It's not the same as what it will be, but the step 1 through 3 are there, you know? Just the details of each step are a little different. And that's what I was saying, like, I wonder... So the Cassidy screenplay was described as being across a ton of different time periods with, like, a really convoluted lore that only, like, the deepest of fans would be able to follow. And I was like, what what would different time periods look like? And then this theory I've toyed with is that Stitchline Games is sort of or not Stitchline Games, Stitchline in general. Stitchline Games, it's like saying Terminator 2. It's like you want to always add in the extra thing if you're talking about Terminator 1. And, or anyways, it would be interesting if that plot line was born from the Cassidy screenplay, which would be born from this, if that makes sense. So, like, it's like, that would explain why it's similar, but so many steps removed in so many spots. Is like you have the initial concepts here, and then that translates to there. It's like a game of telephone. It's like, okay, so we have, like, the FNAF 1 through sister location, and the inklings of FNAF 6's storyline, and then that gets maybe talked about for a screenplay, but then that becomes too complicated, and it's like, following a movie with the way that Stitchline is set up would be a nightmare. So I could see that being like, well, that doesn't really work for a movie, so we can make it into a book series that skips around from different perspectives and time periods and all that to tell one collective story from multiple people's point of view. And it'd be interesting if this was like the birth of that concept. That's complete speculation. I just found that those would kind of run into each other or explain each other potentially, but I don't think so. It just was a concept that's toyed with my mind is crossed a few times with that. I don't have a lot of other stuff to say. There's some funny stuff to work in here that, like, Phone Guy has a gambling addiction. Mike, if Phone Guy is deceased, this means this is being made in 1993. It's funny how much they Talbert really seems to hate Steve Callahan, which is an interesting plot point. Because, it's constantly implicating him in a weird way. Like, it's almost like a canonized version of Purple Guy is Phone Guy. That Talbert really seems to have a vendetta out against him. He implies him here, like, slanders him by saying he lost money in a gambling addiction, with a gambling session. And then he, like, otherwise says, like, it's how did he know about the Golden Freddy suit in FNAF 2? And then there was another one where it's like, it's just so interesting that Talbert has such weird biases. I don't want to say William is Talbert, but it's written so biased that it makes me wonder if that was the case. 'Cause why else would he be so willing to implicate other people and be so active? Like, it's one thing to be paid by a company to spread misinformation. It's another to spread misinformation that actively covers against a serial killer that seemingly has killed your child. Or at least he has claimed that his child has been killed by the serial killer. A lot of it's stuff we would already know. It's more what's clearly different or what's clearly not stated or public information that's interesting in all this, because it treats it as so plain and straightforward. It just really doesn't feel that Scott-like, honestly. This is so weirdly blatant in a way that's different, but at the same time, we don't know how it's originally presented. I've mentioned before, we're seeing this filtered version of it. This is like, oh, this is what we took away from this information. And that's very different from how Scott would present things. Like, the most FNAF-sounding thing in all of it is right here, which is William's monologue. And that seems to be a direct quote from the book. That's very different. So I feel like it's hard to say. I think if we ever get a look at the unfinished book, that would be really... Honestly, that might be a cool release. We don't really have a lot of stuff coming out in the gap between Help Wanted 2 as well as the release of Into the Pit and the week before. If Scott was like, hey, do you guys want like an official PDF of like the unfinished version of the storyline, or like if Scott just like wrote a quick little book or document, or like even just a Reddit post about like, hey, making FNAF, here's some drop plot lines that didn't really go anywhere. That could be a really cool thing to do. I think it'd be really interesting if this plotline like concept was kind of used again. Maybe it was like a website with a character who just like writes blog posts, kind of a character like maybe a character who has a very similar function to Talbert in this. Or maybe more interesting, like a character like Tony from GGY, who has kind of like this junior investigation kind of angle going on. Who has it? And someone's defending Mike, which is another point. Anyway, I really need to stop. I'm sure if I really looked at this, I could find more and more information. I could find more and more little details. But, like, at the end of the day, who fucking cares, you know? It's an unreleased book. It's not canon as far as we know. It's not going to be canon as far as we know. And sometimes looking at the unused story can be useful, but we're looking at such a specific, like, filtered chunk of it, of that unused story, that it's actually kind of not that useful. It would be a little different if we had this unused book and it was told to us that this was the scrap storyline by Scott himself. But it's not. It's what a bunch of people who found an unfinished book says it said. It's a friend of a friend of a friend kind of logic going on here. Maybe there's some interesting stuff here. Like, I like the names. I think using the names is totally fine. But who knows? But